Hi everyone, it's Erika. So I want to let you know that this episode you're about to hear, along with the first few episodes of 2024, were actually recorded back in December. So I get the feeling that there's probably a few of you who are here because you want to hear me talk about coming out. And it is honestly so flattering because I thought that I was just making a cute little video about grapes, and there'd be a few people on the internet who would think it's cute and funny and appreciate that I shared something new about myself. And then it ended up becoming bigger than I thought it would. And one thing led to another. And an article about my sexuality ended up on TMZ. Crazy, weird, bucket list, so cool. And I have felt all of your love and support immensely. So thank you so much for that. I do want to say, if that's what you're hoping to hear, unfortunately, this isn't the episode. I've been thinking a lot about how I'd want to talk about myself and later in life queerness, quote unquote, later. I still think I'm young at 34, but I've been thinking a lot about how I want to talk about that on the podcast. And I have some ideas for how to approach it. But to be totally honest, I just need to feel ready for it. It is something that is deeply personal to me. It's something that I'm still figuring out. Well, not figuring out, but I'm still, working through it on my own. And I just really want to feel comfortable and ready to talk about it. So thank you, and please bear with me. And I do want to say thank you for all of your support and your kind words. I have felt so much of that. And I want to say thank you for tuning into the podcast. I truly love you all. And I can assure you, this interview with Andrew Phung is awesome. It actually works out that I've been able to re-record this little part at the beginning because my interview with Andrew was recorded in December. But as of now, his show, Run the Burbs, which is what we're talking about in the interview, Run the Burbs is now available to stream in the US on Hulu. So if you're in the US, go ahead and binge Run the Burbs season 1 and 2 after listening to this episode. And if you're in Canada, as always, you can find Run the Burbs on CBC Gem. Thank you all so much. I hope you have a happy 2024. And now let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, and today I am speaking with Andrew Phung. But first, I love to start the episode by talking about something I was happy to see this week. And to be honest, the timing for this one is a bit awkward because you'll be listening to this and this will be the new year, so it'll be 2024. But I am recording this in mid-December, so it's still 2023. Ooh, I'm in the past. So I feel like if this was in real time, I would be talking about how I was happy to see the holidays and stuff like that. But I have to talk about where I am right now. So I'm like, what is a happy to see thing that will still be relevant at the beginning of 2024? And if I had to choose something, I think it would be that I am happy to see that 2023 is ending. I don't know about you. Everybody I know has been so tired leading up to the end of this year. And I have gone to a few holiday parties this year, and somehow at almost every party, the phrase I keep hearing is 2023 was about survival and 2024 will be about revival. I don't know if that sounds dark or anything, but I get it. 2023 was filled with amazing yet challenging moments for myself. And at the end, I feel like I've learned and I've grown and I've become a way better person than I was at the beginning of 2023. But I am tired and I am excited that it's coming to an end. So I am hopeful that if there is anyone who felt like they did 2023 in survival mode, that you are now currently in 2024 and you feel like you are ready to be revived and you are ready to thrive. Because I would love if everybody could have a year, at least just some time in the year when we're all feeling good. Can we go for that? Okay, cool. And hopefully this is going to create a lot of happy to see moments for me in 2024. Something that I am really excited for in 2024 is the return of the sitcom Run the Burbs. And today it is my pleasure to be speaking with actor, comedian, and writer Andrew Phung. So you might know Andrew as Kimchi from Kim's Convenience, and now he is the co-creator of the sitcom Run the Burbs. If you haven't heard of Run the Burbs, it is this sitcom that follows the Phams. So it's the Pham family, and they are Vietnamese, Indian, and Canadian. And it talks about their life basically taking on the suburbs. Andrew is a writer on the show, and he also plays the lead character, also named Andrew. And it's really a fun and feel good show that does take on family life and parenting while also sharing these diverse cultural details and different perspectives. In this interview, Andrew and I talk about what it's like representing different cultures and making different BIPOC groups feel seen, while at the same time telling these joyful and sometimes challenging family stories with specificity and authenticity in a way that pretty much everybody can relate to. Season 3 of Run the Burbs premieres on January 9th, so I'm so happy I got the chance to speak to Andrew before Season 3 comes out. This is a very inspired conversation, so let's just get into it. Without further ado, this is Andrew Phung, and I hope you enjoy it. So now, when people see you on the street, do they know that there's a difference between the Andrew Phung and then the Andrew Pham who is on Run the Burbs?
I think people know there's an inherent difference, but like it's hard to separate it because like for a long time people would come on and be like, "Yo, Kimchi, what's up?" I'm like, "What's up, man?" And then some people apologize like, "We know you're not Kimchi." I'm like, "It's all good. Like I'm not mad about it." And for me, it's like this happened recently at a Raptors game. I was like waiting for my son. He was in the bathroom, and these two like 12, 13-year-olds came up, and they're like, "Oh my God, are you Andrew Phung?" And I was like, "Yeah," and they were like so pumped, and they're just like going on about how they love the show, and their dads came up, and the kids were South Asian dads, and there's like, "Can we get a picture with you?" And then the dads were like, "They love you, man. They watch all your stuff." And I turned to the dads, I'm like, "Man, did you ever think in our lifetime that our kids would see an Asian person in this country, in Canada, recognize them from TV, know their name, and be a fan of their work?" And the two dads were like, "No, man, we never thought that would happen." So the idea that you could see me or like Paul Sun Young Lee or Simu on the street and recognize us from TV is like incredible. And so I'm never offended by it. If you think I'm Andrew Pham, if you think I'm Kimchi, I'm all good with it because that means you watch something I've done. And if you're shouting out my name, you like what I do. And that's all I can ask for.
Hey, we'll take it. That's such an amazing story. And really, your characters resonate. I think, yes, people see an Asian man on TV and that means a lot to them. But even beyond that, your characters resonate. I have a friend and she lives in South Carolina, and her two daughters are like, "Is Kim's Convenience a real place in Toronto? If we go to Toronto, can we go and visit it?" I tell them, yes, it's a real place. But I think that part of what makes the work you do, especially Run the Burbs, something that really hits home for people is you do feel that there's so much authenticity and so much of you and your real experience that you bring into it. And especially with Run the Burbs, I'm like, oh, I can see that there are parts of Andrew Phung that are parts of Andrew Pham. So I want to ask about all of this. I want to ask about the representation. But first, I want to ask, what drew you to tell a story about the suburbs?
I think I grew up in the suburbs. I grew up in the northeast of Calgary, and if you know Calgary, the northeast was like it was like all the new suburbs that were popping up in the 70s and 80s, and it was really the only place for immigrants to be able to afford a home at that time in Calgary. And so growing up in that neighborhood, going to those schools, being a product of that place, I've always been attached to the suburbs. There's always been a comfort in the suburbs. But if you notice from television, often the suburbs leave families of color out of the narrative and the storytelling. So there's this idea of picket fences and the sprawl. We're often not there, or we're like this family that is like shielded away, like you see a glimpse of us in the background. And so that's really what was the inspiration of it, just like this lived experience of growing up in the suburbs, but then also pairing it with being a young father. When we were conceiving this idea, when I was developing this idea, I had, I still have two young kids, but they were much younger. And I felt like with Kim's Convenience, you often hear the stories of like the immigrant story. you see the parents, what their struggle is like, but we actually never, we very rarely see the story of the children of immigrants and their experiences parenting, because they often parent with one foot in Canada and then one foot in the country that their parents are from or they are born in, but they haven't been to or haven't been to since they were like a little kid. And so I really wanted to see the how that evolved and the blend of it. So it's like I always said, like, how would kimchi be a dad? And what was the evolution of that? And so it was such an easy idea to put together. And in development, there were a lot of things that changed in the development of the show, because when you get a show and the network orders it, they develop it. But the one thing that never changed was the two things that never changed was one, the suburbs, and two, this family never changed. In development, their jobs changed and some of like some things about their background, but like these characters never changed. It always looked like this. So really, it was just, I want to tell a story of the people I see around me, my cousins, the people that come up to me on the street. They got kids now, and so it's very near and dear to me to tell a story about the suburbs.
Part of what makes it such a refreshing family story, and especially a refreshing Asian family story, a lot of the stories that I see in the media around Asian parents, it's a lot about the intergenerational trauma and how they're so hard on their kids, and there's that emotional disconnection. And a lot of that is based in reality. That's an experience that I had growing up. It might have been an experience that you had, so it's legitimate. But at the same time, when you watch Run the Burbs and you see Andrew and Camille, I don't see them being hard on their kids. I see them rooting for their kids and supporting them 100%. Of course, they're imperfect people. Everyone has their shortcomings. But was this a conscious decision that you made when you were developing this family?
Absolutely conscious. And like you use the word trauma, and like that's a word that we use because often stories of people of color from the BIPOC community are often rooted in trauma. I am in no way denying trauma. Like, trauma exists. The experiences we live in, we're always facing it. But even in like Run the Burbs, we wanted to showcase a world where, like, for them, it was like they were just trying to raise their kids and be good people and be good partners. The trauma still exists. In episode 1 of season 2, Camille deals with a guy who says, "Go back to your country." We deal with that every day. And it was interesting because, like, when I pitched that cold open, one of the notes we got back was like, we'd really loved an episode to like expand and deal with this. And my response was, we don't get to have episodes in our life where we deal with it and it's solved at the end of the day. Instead, what we've developed is like coping mechanisms to like defend ourselves. So what I actually wanted was just to see Camille lay the smack down, show how she deals with it, and then go get her ice cream and live life, like to keep living life. Because really that's how we have to deal with those situations. And I had a conversation with my son about it yesterday. He had a bad day at school and we had to talk about it, and he expressed his feelings. And I said, thank you for sharing it. You will have bad days. They will happen. I can't stop them from happening. You can't either. But it's up to you to learn how to deal with the bad days. So we wanted to like really show this family at their best, aspirational, living their best life. And it was a very conscious decision to show a family in 2023 how they raise their kids and take care of their kids. And it dawned, like, for me, it's like you see little glimpses of like the immigrant parenting. Like in season 1, my mom hits me with the slipper, and that was totally improvised on the day because she was yelling at me and blocking. And then she like looked around, and then I stopped her. I'm like, why did you look around? She's like, I was looking for something to hit you with. And I'm like, hit me with it. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, hit me with it. And so it's like mining the like our relationship for comedy. But then we see the parallel with how Andrew and Camille raised their kids. Positive. We didn't, with Kia, we didn't want like a coming out episode. We just wanted an acceptance. And for me, the more relatable thing isn't like the coming out wasn't the story we wanted to tell. The story we wanted to tell was her embarrassment of when her parents find out she has a crush. That's so relatable. And so we wanted just like to normalize and accept. It is about parents who want the best for their kids and cheer on their kids. And I get that, we get told a lot. It's so refreshing to see a marriage where the the partners just love each other, and the kids and parents love one another. And I'm like, that's so wild to me that we say it's refreshing to see people who love each other. And I know like that was the intent going in. I wanted a family that loved each other. That doesn't mean there's not conflict, because we know the people you love the most are the ones you trash talk the hardest, the ones you joke around with the most. And that's what we wanted. But it was very much a conscious decision to show a family who just love one another, to not root it in trauma.
Yeah. Of course, there are situations in the show that are exaggerated because it is a TV show, but I feel so much of how the family deals with issues, it is quite real, and it does in a light way. It does acknowledge the nuance. Another situation that stuck out to me was in season 2, there was the episode when Andrew and Camille are teaching Kia how to drive. She had just turned 16. And then Andrew acknowledges that people could potentially think she's a bad driver because she's Asian. And what I thought was so interesting about that plot point is there's the acknowledgement, but there's not the resolution because you can't resolve it. And it's interesting that it's so many just situations that any family can really go to, whether it's teaching their daughter how to drive or blending families during a wedding. And race and culture are not necessarily central to it, but it's just an influence to it.
Yeah, an influence, definitely. Like that episode in particular, Andrew has this fear of his daughter. He's so defensive of the stereotype around bad Asian drivers. But then Camille calls it out, was like, yeah, but your mom's actually a bad driver. I'm like, yeah, she's a bad driver, but not because she's Asian, because she's just a bad driver. Like for me, like for the character Andrew, and that was something I brought to the writer's room of just like, I have that fear of like when my kids hit the road, I'm just like, man, you got to drive good, man, because people are going to judge you. They look at you, they see an Asian driver, they're going to judge you. And so, it's all about giving my kids the tools to like prepare and deal with the world, to defend themselves, and but it's also rooted in something for Andrew, because like later in the episode, the driving instructor comes out and he's Asian. Andrew's like, oh man, he's Asian. And it's like he catches himself in that. So it's like we're always kind of mining these the experiences, the fears, and kind of how we see the world, and bring it into the comedy. Like the other one I'm really happy about was Culture Fest, when we had the curry smackdown. And I love it because like everyone's so ride or die over their food and their curry. And it was just an opportunity to show these characters like trash talking each other. And where else could like a Vietnamese woman walk in and say to an Indian woman and a black man, your curries are garbage. They look and smell disgusting. Mine are the best. And I love that we were able to do that with the show. And like we have 2 cultural consultants on the show. And something we really landed on is it's not about just authenticity. It's about specificity, because like we can't be everyone's family. We can only be the family that we are. So we try to be specific to this family. And so what's interesting is like, especially like from the Vietnamese community, some of our, some clips blow up on TikTok, and people commenting, they're just like, wait, like they're speaking Vietnamese like differently. And I'm like, yeah, we live in Canada, right? So like everything is evolved and changed, and the culture has changed. So we can only be specific to this type of family. And it was like that on Kim's Convenience, because I remember some of the early comments were just like, this isn't a Korean family. And someone came back later on and was like, I was wrong. That's not my Korean family, but that's a Korean family. And so we are trying to be specific as possible for the fams, which is so interesting because we've never seen a Vietnamese Indian family on television before.
Last year, I went to this panel that focused on it was the Lunar New Year episode, the Tet episode. Yeah. And you talked about authenticity versus specificity, and I got so much out of that panel. And one of the questions from the audience was around the tradition of giving the red envelopes and how the fams did it differently than usual Vietnamese tradition. So can you explain how the fams give red envelopes and the creative decision behind doing that?
Yeah, and I'm really excited because as you say that, I just watched a cut of this year's Lunar New Year episode. We make a Lunar New Year episode every season. And it's a joy because like only like we can do it. We can do it, right? So it's rooted in like, for me, when I got married, I started giving out red envelopes, but I love to do it with a game, and I love like the games in doing it. So my older cousin did it. Kian did it first. He brought out like a money wheel. He'd spin the wheel and you get what's on the thing. My go-to is, and they're all Price is Right games. My go-to is I hot glue red cups to like a trifold board, and then I put money on the inside, and then I cover it with tin foil, and you got to punch in and what you get. So I put $5, $10, $20, $50, $100. So depending what you get. And I just, for me, it's like you take the tradition and then you have some fun with it. And that is an evolution, right? That is an evolution of the games. And my aunts and uncles were like, we can't compete. We're just going to give it to the old school way. And like one uncle was just like, can you just stand in a line? I'm so sick of like calling out your name and having to give it to you. Stand in a line and walk through and I just give it to you. Like he's trying to find the most efficient way. Whereas when it gets to like the young kids' turns, we spend 2 hours giving out money with games. But it is like an evolution of Lunar New Year, and specifically Tết for the Vietnamese community. And I'm proud of it. And so, and it's evolved even again, like over the last couple of years, we started renting a hall because no one wanted to host it anymore because there's too many people and it became so messy. And then whoever was hosting it was getting complaints from neighbors because we were taking up all the parking. So we said, screw it. We're getting a hall. And so we get a hall every year now. And that's like the evolution of the tradition.
I love that you did that because it also relieves what I believe is some guilt when it comes to first, second generation immigrants being in a new country and not really knowing if they're interacting with their family's culture in the traditional way. I get asked all the time if I speak Tagalog, and I say, I can when I'm at home long enough. I can understand Tagalog, but I don't have an accent. So my family says that I sound like some Valley girl speaking Tagalog, and it sounds like a comedy set, which is great. Love being able to make my family laugh. Seeing the way that the fans interact with tradition, for me, it relieves the pressure because I know, okay, eventually when I have a family, I can figure out tradition in the same way. And another episode that really stuck out to me in this past season is the episode when Camille starts freaking out a little bit because she realizes she doesn't know the Indian traditions to pass down, or she doesn't feel like she's as entrenched in her culture. Can you tell me more about how you decided to develop that story?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I also want to just go back. You went over your family making fun of you so nicely because I know it's 100 times worse. It was such a PG thing because I know deep down inside your Filipino family ain't holding back on you, okay? I got a group chat with all my cousins, and there's an episode where I speak Vietnamese, and my cousin Kian says, hey, your greatest acting performance is convincing people you speak Vietnamese well. Like just so savage. Like, and it happened like 2 minutes after that scene aired. Like he was watching in real time, just ready to go. Our family comes at us the hardest.
Yes, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. The episode 2 with Camille and like feeling like she lost, like is losing traditions or wasn't connected, was like kind of one we had in season 1, but there's only so much runway to tell a story. And so in season 2, it was like a priority to do that episode. We had it locked and loaded earlier. And for us, at the beginning of every season, when we start writing, we break down, we're like, what are the traditions? What are traditions or things we want to see? And when that story came about, we were like, let's root it in something. And so I think it's so relatable for a second generation child of immigrants to feel like they're not connected to their culture. And in particular, I remember Raki, who plays my wife, Camille, was in the writer's room for season 1, and she was telling us the story about how she was trying to do like a family tradition with like all her cousins, and then one cousin was like, oh, we need this candle, and they're like, why do we need the candles? Like, where do we get a candle? And so it's like just remembering elements and bits and pieces of it. It's so relatable. And so you take things like that and you plop them into the world and the storytelling. And what I've always said was like, I didn't want Run the Burbs to be this thing where we told you how our tradition is. I actually wanted Run the Burbs to be like an opening of the door to show you and welcome you in. And so you can watch that episode and just relate to it, connect to it, or just understand it. And so we didn't want to be so heavy handed with it. We really always wanted to have fun with it. But that one came really easy because, you know, that was like just you're looking at the characters and how they're feeling, and like the feeling that Andrew and Camille aren't so connected to their culture and tradition is so relatable. You know, you see it kind of everywhere, and I'm discovering that now. Like for me, as I get older, it's been a rediscovery of my Vietnamese traditions. And my dad's even being like, hey, you're half Chinese too, so you got some Chinese stuff in there. And like, that's a whole other thing I got to deal with. Introducing my kids to that, and especially when you have kids, it's when you have kids that you start feeling like, oh man, like you feel like you're letting them down. You really got to connect them, right? And so, yeah, that was an easy story. And like when we are in the writer's room, it's always just like pitching ideas that relate to the character's wants and needs. And that's what we figure out first. What are the character's wants and needs? And we go from there.
Yeah, part of what makes the show so fun is diversity is part of it, but it's not necessarily, you know, hitting you in the face with it all of the time. It's often these scenarios that almost any family will go through, and then the culture influences it just because that's part of the character and that's part of their background. So when you are in the writer's room, how does it work when you decide, okay, we're going to write this episode about my young son hitting puberty? How do you decide how culture influences that story? Or any story. It doesn't have to be about the wet dreams.
I don't think we decide. I think it's more of like just being specific and aware. And so that story in particular, like I'm really proud of, because I genuinely can't think of a time a show has dealt with a kid's first wet dream, you know, and Andrew has to explain what it's like, and he's like, oh, you got to empty the clip, you got to clear out the cache, you got to, you know, and like explaining it to his kid, and then that's where we introduce the fams always have these kits, and this is like a wet dream kit, and all these like they always have kits for milestones in their kid's life. But like we don't decide to like do it. It's more of like as we figure out the story, we're like looking at like how these characters would react and like pulling from them. We're just trying to be specific to these characters. So in that quest for authenticity, there is a duty to be specific. And when you're specific, when you're looking at these characters as fully fleshed out human beings and people, it's so easy to pull from it, you know? Like this came up in season 3. I was looking at wardrobe. They give you wardrobe department, like puts together wardrobe charts for like all the characters. And they had sent one in for my daughter, Kia, played by Zariah, to go to work. She works at Bubble Bay Cafe. And they had sent these like really casual looks. And then Nilu, who's the co-showrunner on season 3, was like right away flagged. They're like, there's no way Andrew and Camille, as Asian parents, would let their child go to work wearing that. Right? Mm-hmm. So it's like just like understanding the characters, right? And I said, yes, Andrew and Camille are young, thoughtful parents, but like they would have been taught when you go to work is how you show the world that you want to be perceived, right? So if you're wearing like ripped up t-shirt, that would not fly. And that's like, that comes from our life, right? So it's like just being really thoughtful of how the characters would react in these situations, understanding their lived experiences is what brings in the specificity. And thankfully we have 2 really great consultants where like Vin, who's our Vietnamese cultural consultant, will read a script and he just like kind of just make little notes, and he's like, hey, it would be really cool if this, and he'll remind me of things. I'm like, oh yeah, that is a thing. Yeah. So really it's just like being thoughtful with the characters.
For anyone who's listening and they might not be familiar with what a cultural consultant does on set, can you explain what they do?
Yeah, cultural consultant is just like another eye on the content, an eye on the script, an eye on the cuts, an eye on the dialogue. So often what happens is like when you have like a show about like a Vietnamese Indian family, there may only be like a limited handful of voices in the room, right? Because you have like a variety of writers. And so thankfully we have like a really diverse room, but at the end of the day, that means that I'm the only Vietnamese voice in the room, though there are other Asian writers. I'm the only Vietnamese voice. So bringing a cultural consultant on just gives another set of eyes to like, Vin will go through and make sure the dialogue is right. Look at the content of the stories. He'll look at any of the traditions we're trying to do. If we have questions on like food, he'll answer them. But he's also just looking at it like, Vin is so smart. He's like, he's a professor and he's like so entrenched in the literary world that he looks at story as well. So he'll kind of point out some plot points, and it's like just another set of eyes. And I'm really thankful for that, because like it takes the weight off of my shoulders and off the weight off of the shoulders of the other writers as well. And so just if we have questions, I remember in season 2, in the Culture Fest episode, Andrew, his sister, and his dad sing an old Vietnamese lullaby. This song is like 150 years old, or like 100 years old. Our legal department was like, you need to find the writer or the family of the writer to get the rights to sing this song. We're like, what are you talking about? So the theme of the song is to Frère Jacques. So that is in public domain. The lyrics are not. So what we had to end up doing was Vin and I rewrote the lyrics to the lullaby. But we asked legal, we're like, there's 26 words in the lullaby. How many words can we repeat in our version? They're like, 6. So Vin and I went through and we had to like figure it out. And what I loved was the comments were just like, oh, the 3 little butterflies, you sang it. And people were just like, commenting. And I'm like, it's wild because like, it's so old that people don't even realize that we're not singing the right lyrics. And then someone finally commented, they're like, this song's a little different than it was when I was a kid. And I was like, here's what happened. And I broke down the legalities of it. But that's what the cultural consultant does. Like, we just work on making it specific, making sure it feels right. And it's so nice to be able to ask questions. Literally in scripts, when we're writing stuff, sometimes we'll be like, Camille is cooking Indian dish. And then we put that in the draft, and then Tara gets it, and Tara's like, well, Camille could be cooking this, this, and this. How about she cooks this because it's this day, and this is how she would be feeling? And we're like, thank you, right? So it just allows us to ask questions. It allows us to not know. And I think that's like the freedom that gives you to not know and to be curious is so freeing. And so when you do a show, like when you're making a show like this, it's a constant exploration, even for the writers, like I just sent a meme to one of my season 2 writers. There was a thing where we were writing an episode and Chu Hai came up, and Chu is uncle and Hai is the name. Chu Hai, Uncle Hai. And then she's like, why do you keep referring to Chu Hai? Like, it's very specific. And I'm like, oh, damn. Chu Hai in like popular culture is that one uncle who shows up and he drinks a little too much Hennessy and starts karaokeing. You have a Chu Hai. Erika, tell me you have a Chu Hai in your family.
I think it's an aunt.
An aunt?
Yeah.
Yes, it's an aunt. Do they try to dress like they're 30, but they're 55, 60?
She looks 30. Oh my gosh. I'm like, she'll listen and she'll be like, what do you mean I look 30? So yeah.
So my family has a bunch of Chu Hais, but yes, you're right. Also, funny that you say that, because I have an uncle who has like a younger wife, and then one day she came up to me and she's like really proud of me. And I'm like, oh, thank you so much, aunt who is 5 years younger than me. Like, I just,
yeah.
it's just like in those moments of just like acknowledging, where we're at. But yeah, it's like, so the Chu Hai came up and she's like, what is Chu Hai? And I told her, and she's like, oh, and now we're always sending each other Chu Hai memes. But it's like, yeah, the discovery of all the elements to these characters, and even within the culture. And so, yeah, like, it's just so pumped. This year I was really pumped. We were able to like bring on some writers that were like junior writers that could shadow the room. And there was one writer that was living in Vietnam. So bless his heart, he was in the room from like midnight to like 8 because everything was flipped. But like it was really fun because like whenever we'd hit like a Vietnamese moment, it was so fun. Or in the room when we break something down that is Indian, it's like asking questions and then laughing about it and then like trying to figure out like, can we do this? Can we do that with it? So it's like really freeing to have a culture consultant on the show.
It's amazing because there are so many specific details, yes, in Vietnamese culture and Indian culture, but even other cultures that I think really resonate. Even when I think about the Culture Fest episode, as everybody is fighting about their curries, I remember seeing in the background, there is this Filipino booth. And I'm like, oh my God, there are parals. Oh my God, the guy is wearing a barong. And even though that is not central to the plot at all, I was so excited to see these details on TV.
The Culture Fest was like, man, it nearly broke us. Like that episode, because it's like the amount of research that went into it. Like for you to see that in the background makes me feel so happy because the amount of time that went into like every booth, right? I will say this: there's a blooper that exists in that episode. Bob and I, who is like my nemesis in the season, we're kind of having this face off. And as I'm about to leave, he like points in the direction of the China booth and he's like, go back to China. And I stopped and I was like, oh my God. And he looks like at me, he's like, that came out the worst way possible. And it was so, like, you know, Gavin, like, he was just trying, he was making this, it was so funny, but like, it's in that where we're like constantly playing. We give ourselves the freedom to constantly play. And he's like, apologize, like, please don't use it. I'm like, no, don't worry, we won't use it. But it was hilarious in that moment because there's like a joke on a joke there.
Among all the play and the exploration, you had mentioned earlier that it's not often you see these Asian families on TV. Do you feel like you have a sense of responsibility and a sense of pressure when it comes to representing all of these very specific people on screen?
Definitely. I do feel that way. And sometimes I feel like I shouldn't, but I do because I care about it so much. I feel like I have a sense of responsibility and pressure because I care about the work so much. Because if you know me, you know I would never want to let you down, offend you, hurt you. I want to get it less wrong. I want to get it right, but more so less wrong. So there is a pressure because like, I know like even just hearing Vietnamese words on network television, like all the time I get comments of just like, I've never heard a character say "trời ơi" on a network comedy, or to have a conversation with my parents in Vietnamese. And what I love is that we've never gotten comments about the subtitles. No one's ever been like, it's so hard to understand. It's always been like, no, it like enriches the show. So we love it. Like whenever we're like punching up or we're like, we'll just like put in like in parentheses in Vietnamese and get characters to say it. We're always looking for opportunities to do that. So yeah, there's pressure because I care. And I want people to feel like when they watch the show, they can relate to the show. And it's not even just from the cultural aspect. It's also from the aspect of like being suburbanites and being parents. You know, I feel pressure from parents because I want to make sure I get parenting right. And so, yeah, there's always pressure because I care about the work.
What's so fun about the show, though, is I think that you add joy to so many things that when I think back as a kid, brought me shame for no reason. Like I think about going to not necessarily Culture Fest, but going to Filipino culture opening houses and having to wear the traditional outfits. And I was one of the only Asian kids in my school, but somehow when these events happen, all of the Filipinos all of a sudden come out of the woodwork and there's so many of us. But then in my normal day-to-day, I was the only Asian kid. And I remember thinking, oh, this is so weird and so annoying that I have to put this thing on my head. But then, yeah, seeing Kia and Leo dress up, I think that would have been so validating for me to see when I was a kid. And something else that I love about the show is you had mentioned earlier that previously in shows about the suburbs, it's mostly white families at the center, and then maybe a BIPOC family is off on the side, and maybe we see them a little bit. But with the fams on the show, they are really at the center of so many community relationships, and they are so connected to so many people in the community, and they really want to enrich the community. So can you tell me more about making that choice for the show as well?
You start with the character of Andrew and like how he sees the world, and then you bring in the character like of Camille and how she sees the world, and together as a couple they believe in their neighbors, they want the best. And so when they moved into that suburb, when they moved into that house, it was for them, it was like opening the door to everyone else, having relationships with others. We always saw this family as like really positive, right? And and I hope I like to think it's like a reflective of like how my wife and I are in the community, in our neighbors, in our neighborhood, you know. And you know, like my wife is so incredible. She's like so open and caring, and something happened this year. She wasn't gonna do like a big birthday dinner. She usually does like a big birthday dinner. And then she was getting like all these messages from friends being like, "Hey, you doing a birthday dinner? You doing a birthday dinner?" And then she's like, "Yeah, I guess." And one friend's like, "Great, I'm so excited to see so and so, so and so, so and so." And she's like, "Oh." And then that friend was like, "Yeah, it's like my only time of year I get to see them." And it was in that moment that she realized that like her birthday dinner kind of united like 7 friend groups, and it was like one of the rare times these people got to see one another, and they were always really looking forward to it. And so I kind of think of that with the fams, like the way they connect characters in the community, just came so easy, you know, in writing it. But it was also like it came easy because we needed a way to be able to introduce characters really easily. So Andrew could always be like, "Well, we know so and so. We got this person down the street. We know them." And it is a bit of like, I know if you need a tailor, I know what a tailor. If you need this, I know this. You need this, I know this. So it is like, I think, reflective of my life a bit, like I hope. But it was kind of always the way we saw the characters. It was always the way we saw, like we always saw Andrew and Camille the way we see them. Andrew and Camille were always going to be equal, 50-50, no ball and chain jokes. They were always going to be this relationship that supported one another. And I always say ride or die. They're going to be each other's ride or die. And because of that, because that outlook, they will do whatever they need to do to succeed. And in order for you to succeed and be able to do that, I think you need to have like a Rolodex of people, because the people who often succeed the most are the ones that like know people. They can get stuff done. So I think that was like an easy character trait to develop with this family.
And it's been so fun to see them in season 2. We're now, because I feel like season 1 was them trying to figure out, okay, what do I really want? Do I want to take the step towards what I really want? And then season 2 was them living in that and then realizing, okay, there are ups and downs, even though we've taken the risk to go for what we want. Where do they go in season 3?
Season 3 is a very family-centric season. It's about the family. So, you know, with Andrew, he's working his dream job. Camille, she's got her business. But this season, as their success grows in their careers, there is pressure and strain in their family and maintaining that family dynamic, making sure you have time for your kids. So it's a lot of stories this season of Andrew and Camille trying to make time and fight for time with their kids, and then a bit of the butting of the heads with the kids, and then Andrew and Camille making sure they got enough time for their marriage. So it is a very family-centric season. And then on top of that, Ramesh, Camille's father, moves into the house. So now we have 3 generations living in the house. And Erika, I don't know about you, but I know what it was like to have grandparents in the house a lot. And so it's that storytelling now. And then with our supporting characters, we just wanted to have a deeper, richer understanding of them. So now when we bring them into the world, it's not like just for this punchline or joke. It's to understand a bit more about their characters. So it is a very personal and very family-centric season. But I will say, because of that, it lets you have more hijinks and more big adventures. So, you know, the fams, they go to a cottage. You know, that's huge. Family of color at the cottage, like, that's just a big adventure that Nilu, our co-showrunner, always wanted to do. We have a big Halloween episode. How do the fams celebrate Halloween? And if you see how they celebrate anything else, you know the Halloween episode is going to be bonkers, right? But then so those are the big adventures. But then there's really relatable things like the fams look for a new family doctor. Too real, because that is very hard, because we went through that a couple years ago and it is not fun. So it's balancing all those things, but it's a very family centric season.
Oh my God. I grew up in a multi-generational home, so my grandparents live with me.
Yeah.
And I am so excited to see how this unfolds because when I loved living with my grandparents, I loved living with my grandparents. But also I can relate to Kia because when I was a teenager and I wanted to run amok and do whatever, it was very inconvenient to have a grandparent living with me. So I'm really excited to see how this unfolds.
Erika, remember those words, because that remember that word, those words for an upcoming episode, because like, again, it's like I love when we could talk about the show and then people, as they're talking about it, start naming off episodes that occur, and I'm like, yeah, that's an episode. Just being obvious in the choices. Like Kia's turning 17. This idea of rebelling, is a thing now. And so it's like when you just look at the characters, Leo is turning 13, young man, right? How does that affect the world, And it's funny because when we film with those kids, like I look over at Roman Pacino, who plays Leo, I'm like, he used to be a little baby, and now I see little whiskers. I'm seeing them come in now, right? And I'm like, he used to be a little baby, right?
Oh no,
and
is he gonna shave?
See, again, you're just rattling off stories on me here, okay? But that's what we want. Like when things happen for the fams in the world, when things happen in the story, we want to feel like, of course that's happening. We just a relatability. And every time we pitch a story, we're always like, okay, that's the relatable thing. What's the fam version of it? How do the fams see that? Like going to the cottage is one thing. How do the fams go to the cottage, right? And so that to me is like the joy of the show, is that you're really connected to this family.
It's true. I even remember the one episode when, and I think now that we are in this pandemic / post-pandemic world, everyone can relate to Camille needing to get on a Zoom call and then realizing that it's not plugged in. She doesn't have the charger. Call starts in a minute. What do you do? And I'm like, ooh, I can feel the anxiety. So it's very, very real.
The resetting the router was my favorite part of that episode. Where we literally watch them reset a router, and Camille's like, you should do it again. And she's like, no, you gotta leave it. Just leave it. Don't touch it. Just don't touch it. And we sit in that. So it's an episode that takes place in real time, and I'm so proud of that episode. Because when that was pitched, we're like, okay. And then filming it, we had to shoot it like a play. Because normally when you film a scene, the one scene, but this one, you kind of had to know all the scenes. Because sometimes we would start doing one scene and flow through and do the next scene. And that was so uncommon because you'll cut and reset up. But we just like did all the scenes together. That episode nearly broke us, but it was so worth it.
I could see that because watching it as a viewer, I was getting stressed out, especially at the very end. Everyone's trying to get out of the house. Camille's trying to get on this call. Camille and Kia decide now is the time to hash out like tension between them, which obviously is the worst time, but that is so real that people will pick the most inopportune time to try to like call somebody out for something. But it's real. It's something that we've all gone through.
Yeah, it's human timing. It's human timing of like, sometimes before I go to bed, my wife will be like, can you help me with tech support? And I know right then and there, I'm like, that's a solid hour and a half of me helping deal with something. And then I'm not going to bed till like an hour and a half later, right? So, but it's human nature. Like we just got to deal with it, and everything snowballs together. But yeah, that episode. It's one of my favorites of the series. But it was bonkers to shoot.
So, without spoiling anything, what is something that you are most looking forward to in season 3?
In season 3, what I love is seeing relationships one-on-one. So we try to see some Camille Leo stories, Andrew Kia stories, Andrew Leo, Camille Kia. We starting to see like parenting one-on-one, and we're starting to see the dynamics, and we're trying to showcase the characters' evolutions within those relationships. It's a season so chock full of relationships, and seeing Camille and Ramesh, father moving home, how does that jive with his daughter? It's her home now. Andrew and his parents, it's there's an episode coming up later where like Andrew's parents want in on the will because they aren't listed as the guardians for the kids. And it's rooted in my story because I remember my mom found out that we didn't list her as and my dad as the guardians of the children if we pass. And she came over to my house and she's like, Andrew, I will die before the children are ever hurt. Like she was making a case to be in the will. So it's like it's the relationships. I love seeing the relationships throughout the season. And like for me, like I it's hard because like I you know I don't want to spoil it, but like at the same time I say things like new family doctor. People are like, yeah, we know, we get it. Halloween, oh yeah, we get it. Going to the cottage, yeah, we know. And so it's like I could say a word about every episode, and it kind of like it piques your interest, right? But I'm so excited about the one-on-ones this season between the characters because we truly see them grow. We see parents, we see kids, and we see a marriage. We see a relationship with the neighbors. Big crossroads. Yeah, I hope that kind of pitches a season. But like, Run the Burbs has always been a show we wanted to make where it's just a slice of life. For 22 minutes, for 30 minutes a week, you get to like just disconnect from the world and just laugh with the fams. We welcome you into our home.
I love it. I can't wait to see what happens season 3. And if anyone hasn't watched yet, they can catch up. It's on CBC Gem. And I've also had other stars from the show on the podcast. So Julie Nolke, who plays Sam, has been a guest.
Yeah.
And then Anne Pornell, who was a recurring guest star in season 2, she's been on the show. Andrew, if people want to keep up with you or if they want to tune in to season 3, where can they do that?
Season 3 is premiering on CBC. It's streaming for free in Canada on CBC Gem on Tuesday, January 9th. Note the date change. We're now on Tuesdays, no longer Wednesdays. They follow me at Andrew Phung on all the social media platforms. And if you love Julie and you love Anne Pornell, you will get more of them in season 3. And I will say Anne Pornell's hair in season 3 is like just... okay, so Anne Pornell in particular. So I'm such a fan of Anne. I've literally watched her. I literally saw her in 2008, opening for a group at Comedy Bar, and I was like, that girl is gonna be famous. She's so good, and I'm so glad we were able to get her for the show. But I remember her agent emailed us and was like, "Hey, heads up, Anne Pornell would like to change her hair color. She just wants to know if that's going to be an issue for the show." And I said back, I'm like, Anne Pornell wants to change her hair color. Will that be an issue for the show? Does the agent know what we love about Anne Pornell? I'm like, oh, what hair color is it gonna be? Like, I'm too excited now. And wardrobe is like, what color is it gonna be? What outfit are we gonna put on Anne Pornell? Anne Pornell is an opportunity. Anne Pornell is an opportunity at comedy every time. And so I love working with her. I love Julie Nolke because you give her a note, a line, and she's like, she'll go hit you with a slam dunk, every single time. And a couple times, like there's this season, we give her a thing where I'm like, hey, Julie, we gotta do this thing on you. And she's like, and I'm like, is it cool? And she's like, is it cool? Like, she's like, oh, of course it's cool. Like, she's all about making the comedy hit. So I'm just so honored to work with them and everyone on the show.
Well, everyone go back and check out their interviews. I did not know Anne was coming back for season 3. I cannot wait. I mean, I was excited regardless, and now I'm even more excited. So I can't wait to tune in. Andrew, thank you so much for chatting today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. And I gotta say, watching you interview, like I watch your clips, like I'll scroll through and I always stop and I watch them. You are so good at what you do. Your questions are always on point. But like I teared up like watching your Survivor vote. Like I was watching a best of compilation of you playing Survivor, and like the joy you exude. Because I don't think I've ever seen a Survivor winner just like people be so genuinely happy for. Because there's always a bit of like, and so just like the way you exude energy and positivity in the world, just keep doing what you're doing. I am in awe of what you do, and I'm so honored to have chatted with you today.
Oh my gosh, I am so flattered that you said that. I am going to keep this clip for my personal collection. That sounds so weird, but I'm gonna remember this.
You're hype up before you like jog, before you do like a sporting activity. You let's do it. Let's go.
I think it goes without saying, if you have not watched season 1 and 2 of Run the Burbs, I highly suggest you catch up and then tune in for season 3. And honestly, thank you, Andrew, for everything you do in terms of diverse storytelling and relatable storytelling. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I cannot wait for season 3. Now, I am recording this in December, but this is going to be my first episode in January. So a natural question that one would answer around the new year that I have been asked by people already is, do you have a New Year's resolution? And the answer is no. And this is new for me. I am normally a goals girl. I normally have a list of SMART goals basically written out for the beginning of the year, and then I track them throughout the year. I haven't done that my whole life, but I did do that last year, maybe the year before, and it was fun and it was cool because I did achieve goals as a result of that thinking. But then I also felt like it was so much pressure. I think it was very much rooted in the need to have control. I don't know. I have a therapist working on that stuff. But I want to, maybe this is my resolution. I want to be less of a goals girl. And I think being a goals girl obviously has benefited me in my life. Because of that, I've been able to achieve so many things that I'm so proud of. And being a goals girl, I think, has given me the confidence to know that if there's something I want, I can make it happen. But when I think about what I want next year, really it's to live with ease and to live with flow. 2023 had a lot of surprises, had a lot of things change for me that seemed scary and seemed out of my control. But I think that when I just moved towards directions that felt good and I just allowed things to happen, I don't know, I ended up in this very self-compassionate, self-accepting, and happy and content and peaceful and excited state. So when I think about next year, something that's really important to me is prioritizing using the energy and the talent and the time I have to tell stories that are important to me and to tell stories from points of view that feel authentic and real to me. And I want to thank everybody for listening to this podcast, because even having your support on the podcast gives me the confidence to know that telling the stories I want to tell is possible and there are people who are interested. So thank you for that support. And I want to just keep, I guess, getting out of my head and more so operating with my heart and moving in directions that feel good to me. Because I know now that when I put my mind to it, I can achieve, but now I want to use my heart. I've proven to myself that when I put my mind to it, I can achieve and I can hit goals. But this year, I think I want it to be less about the achievement and more about the feeling. And I have a feeling that when I have that mindset, I'm going to end up having some really cool achievements. But who knows? I'm very excited for 2024. Let me know if you have any New Year's resolutions and if you feel like you are confidently going to reach them or at least live them. So thank you so much for tuning in to this podcast. I am excited for the guests that I have for the rest of 2024. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are on Instagram and on YouTube. It's at Happy to See Me Pod. And as always, I will be happy to see you next Monday.